if you took out one of the bases or whatever spots, the entire rest of the military would still be in touch with each other. There'd be no loss of communication. If you're not sure what happens, if that happens, go back and study both Iraqi wars and watch what happened in those. Because Iraq didn't bother to build their military around the internet. Okay, and they had all communications going through a central communications building in Baghdad. Both times we went to war with Iraq, what did we spend the first week or two doing?
Shock and awe.
Shock and awe. Object of shock and awe was to knock those communication centers out. And that knocked all those Revolutionary Army units sitting all over Iraq and in the First War sitting over in Kuwait, all out of communications with Baghdad, and the ones out there in the field had no idea what was going on any longer. And whether they should fight or whatever. Go back to the First War and look at the number of times that the coalition forces would come up on the IRA units and they'd just surrender without putting up any fights. They had no idea if the war was still going on or what were they supposed to be doing, because we had cut their communications off the previous week and they were lost out there in the middle of it. The internet was designed to stop that from happening with the U.S. military. Okay? Does everybody follow on that? Now, we also built it to do research and all types of other stuff too, but that's why DARPA poured a ton of money into it, making what was originally named ARPANET, which was the internet. Okay? And then there they go through what I just told you, so we'll skip that. And now they talk about some different type devices that you're going to use within the network. One is you've got to have media, and the media can be, basically breaks into three categories, and that's where, how are we sending that signal across? You could be sending it via copper, which is what we did traditionally, and still plenty of stuff using copper as the signal method of transmitting it. And there's new and different things breaking out on copper right now on it, but they're looking at actually getting 40 gig internet across copper now. Okay? And that's going across copper. I'm not saying on fiber, I'm saying copper. Okay? And there's a bunch of stuff going on with that, getting ready to come out with. But we've expanded copper further than we thought we would. Fiber optic, where we send it across by light signals, which you've seen lots and lots of that occurring more and more in the last few years. We've watched them all over the place around us be burying fiber optic cable wherever we turn and go. And now they're going to start widening 151 out front of us. I'm sure we'll get to watch them again. We'll lay some more fiber all over the place out there, both for purposes of moving fiber, and two, as they get it all set up of connecting all the lights and everything together whenever they finally finish it, to get them communicate back and forth well with each other. And then you could use wireless as your third one. With wireless, what is your media? Air. Okay? Now, of those three, which one's the most secure? Fiber, copper, or wireless? No, not copper. Fiber. And up till the last 6-8 months, I would have told you that it was very secure. now apparently some people have come out with some equipment that makes fiber not quite as secure as it was, because you've got to break the line to be able to get the signal off there or get into the equipment in any event. You can't just go out and get near where the fiber optic line runs and steal the signal. You can't wiretap it easily. However, now they've got equipment that you can cut that line fast, connect it into another piece of equipment quickly, and keep on going. And they claim that a lot of the fiber optic equipment will never notice that the line got broken. And so then you can intercept the signal at that point. And I've been reading that a little bit recently. Copper, real easy to steal the signal. It's just like wiretapping telephone lines out there. Wiretapping this copper will do the same thing. We just need to get near it and pick up the transmission that's going across it, and we can pick up exactly what's the signal going through that copper on there. Does everybody follow on that? So it's got some protection on it. Wireless, pretty, except for by encrypting everything that you send across it. Otherwise, it's wide open out west on whatever you send, because anybody picking up the signal. So, but anybody can get what all those signals are going with no problem. So it's the least secure. You're going to need a network adapter, something to connect you to the network. And that you'd use a network interface card quite often for that. Smartboard can be aggravating at times. And then you're going to need your central connecting point for your multiple connections. I really don't care where Barack Obama was born. I thought we settled that issue. So then on that network adapter, it's going to have an individual address assigned to it at manufacturer, which is the MAC address, which half of it tells you who the vendor is, and half of it is a serial number for that vendor. You can actually look up MAC addresses at the FCC site, and it'll tell you who made your network connection, your network interface card. No telling. Let's see if they'll let us go back. There we go. Hubs I already mentioned to you. Switches I mentioned to you already, so I was ahead of them. Routers are going to connect different networks together. So with a router, you're connecting multiple networks together. Now, what you think of at home, for most purposes today, that what you think is a modem sitting there, and most purposes it's a router. It is connecting the network of your ISP with your internal network in your house, or the network in your small business, whatever. It's a router there. It's not a modem. A modem converts analog signals to digital signals and vice versa. However, because people learned that the way to connect their computer to the internet was through a modem, which was a little box that connected them to the wall at the house, that then when we don't need to do conversion anymore because everything's digital now and we're not going across the analog phone lines, we still call the box a modem, although it's really not a modem. Well, between all of that, I have just lost that. I guess it doesn't want me standing too close to it when I tell it something to do too. And then if you get a network adapter or your network interface card, one, you got to know what type media connection you're going to be doing, and two, what type speed, and on that, and make sure you have on that. Generally, the faster the different devices are, the faster your network will run. And there's with a slower one in there, it's just that one spot slowed down unless you're back on that ring network. Okay, the network media, as far as the cabling for used in the wire, they mentioned about there's coaxial cable, which is just your, like you've had for coax TV and stuff, where it's got single wire going through the middle and then a negative around the outside of it. Some limitations on that, on speed on that. Then there's twisted pair, which is what you've normally got in most cases for media, as far as metal media on it, where you've got separate pairs of wires. They mentioned there's UTP and STP. UTP says it's unshielded twisted pair. You've got 8 wires in there. They're made into 4 pairs. And then if it is shielded twisted pair, it's got an additional shield all the way around the set of 4 wires. Wednesday I'll try to bring y'all some wires and stuff to show y'all some stuff. Fiber optic, that it uses some different ones, that it can be using LED to transmit, or it can be using a laser to transmit it. If it uses a laser, it can travel a much longer distance at a faster speed. And so you've got a whole big increase on that, and that you've got those available to you, and I'll bring some fiber optic and fiber optic connections for you to see also. So there's a piece of coax, that's a piece of metal right here in the middle. It's got a piece of plastic around it, then there's the braided, or it could be solid metal that goes around the outside of it, and then an outside PVC. It doesn't pick up a lot of interference on it. Well, it acted like it wanted to obey me. There is 2 different types of it out there. There's the RJ59, and I believe it's RJ56 if I remember my numbers right. No, RG6, which is what cable TV, satellite, and actually when you're sending, using it for internet now. Also, you're wanting to be using where they used to use the RJ59 on it. So they had to upgrade that, a lot of cable television systems, to go to the correct kind of type of cable on it. There's our twisted pair. You've got an orange pair, a green pair, a brown pair, and a blue pair. And there's where they've got, actually in their case there it's showing you they got twisted foil around each pair, or it could be around the 4 sets of pairs. That's with Cat 5. There's now Cat 6 out there. There's actually Cat 6, 7, and 8, although I've not seen any 7 or 8 yet. Cat 6 will actually keeps each of the strands separate and have a piece of plastic that goes down the middle of a trough that keeps the separate pairs all separated with plastic between them. I'll bring a piece of that also and let you see what Cat 6 looks like versus Cat 5. Normally when you look at twisted pair, you're looking at Cat 5. But you can get higher speeds on Cat 6. And then they tell you about making patch cables here. It's interesting they call that a patch cable. Yeah, that would be right. Okay. And they just flipped it. To confuse everything, made it look like they're flipping, but they really didn't. They're still, the solid brown is still matched pin 8 to pin 8. The white green is pin 1 to pin 1. Crossover is when you're going to connect two similar machines together. You want to connect two PCs together and exchange information between the two. A regular straight through cable, which is what they're calling a patch cable right here, but you can see it called a straight through cable instead. Sometimes you'll see it called an Ethernet cable too, but you'll hear this one called an Ethernet cable also. So you got to be careful on that, but it's really a straight through versus a crossover. With the straight through, you can plug your PC into the switch back there, and they've got their pins switched inside the machine to recognize the other one, so that what's coming out of send out of your PC is going in on the receive pins on the switch. Now, we went to hook the two PCs together. They're both going to be sending on the same two pins. That's not going to work. They got to get switched so that what gets sent out send ends up going over to receive. So you use a crossover cable to do that, and what the crossover cable does, well, it nicely decided to change screens for me there, I don't know, is that it just switches those. And what you do is you just switch the two pairs as you make the cable on the plug on the two ends, and then the two will talk together. Fiber optic, it's got a core in it that could be glass or it could be plastic. If it's going to be running fiber, if it is going to be running laser, it is going to be glass through there, but it could be a plastic core also when it runs LED. Then there's cladding around it, a protective layer. The protective layer is usually made out of Kevlar. What do we make out of Kevlar?
Body armor.
Body armor. Okay? That's what you do bulletproof stuff with. Object for using it here is that it doesn't stretch much, which is the reason it works for body armor. Okay? And so if we wrap the piece of glass tubing with Kevlar around it, along it, besides the different layers of plastic around it, but that won't stretch when it gets hot because the Kevlar does not have the give and take on it, and so it will support that glass tube, because if it's stretched when it gets hotter, which the plastic's going to do, if you're not sure, go look at a piece of electrical line running down the road this afternoon, see how far down does it hang this afternoon. When you go to school in the morning, see if it's hanging just as far down. If that was glass running through that wire instead of wire, we'd break the glass in there as it's stretched and unstretched. Everybody follow on that? Kevlar will support it and keep it from stretching and breaking. And so they'll use Kevlar around there on that protective layer quite often. Everybody follow on that one? So now you know another use of Kevlar besides protecting Superman. And that wasn't what he used to keep the bullets out, did he? And you can run for miles a piece of fiber optic before it's got to regenerate it again, because you can keep the signal going straight. Back to your regular wire, twisted pairs. The maximum section you can run of that is 100 meters. And then you got to have a device there to regenerate the signal and send it back out again, because it will weaken over time. It does the same thing actually in fiber, but because of how intense, tight that signal is, it doesn't hardly lose it over a long distance. And so we're running fiber between the campuses. And actually, if you went over to Walker and looked around, it should be set up, and I'm assuming it is, because theirs was set up the same. I set it the same in Swainsboro Tech at the same time theirs was, back in the 90s, and that we ran fiber between the buildings to make it travel faster between buildings. Much less even, we weren't thinking about between campuses back then. There we go. Okay, Ethernet can actually use any of those types of media. Although you'll quite often see Ethernet mentioned in terms of twisted pair, Ethernet's actually the way we're sending the information across, and it can use either the any of those types of media. There are standards out there to define how everything works together on it. Old Ethernet standards went up to 10 megabits per second, and it says here up to 10 gigabits per second now, with most running at 100 to 1,000 megabits per second. But like I say, they have got stuff coming out now. First off, you know that you can get 10 gigabits per second in terms of fiber now, because you've got EPB doing that in downtown Chattanooga now. Likewise, like I mentioned, there's the 25 gig copper becoming available out there now too, which is going to require different switching equipment and all of that in it to do it, but that it's going to run across the same copper. And then they summarize it all up for us here, which I've given y'all most of it, but if you notice here, fiber optic, 1,000 to 2,000 meters. Twisted pair, 100 meters, 100 meters. Fiber, 412 meters. Depending on what type of fiber you're using, depends on what's your max distance on fiber, and it can vary a lot. Single mode versus multi-mode. Single mode says we're sending one signal down the middle of that glass tube using a laser. It never touches the wall as it travels down it, so it has to only bend slowly, going around curves, etc. Multi-mode says that we're using LED, and it's sending multiple signals through that same tube at the same time, but they bounce off the walls. And they go off at different angles, and that keeps them from running into each other, and then they send a bunch of signals at the same time, but not quite as fast. Okay? And so you can send lots of stuff that approach on it. Using that. So that's single mode versus multi-mode. Where are we at? Looks like we're going to addressing. All right, let's stop here. And then I'm going to bring some cable, show y'all some of that, and then we'll briefly mention some on addresses on Wednesday. Okay? Any questions? No questions? Okay, then I will see you on Wednesday. And I forgot to turn the recorder on this today until we were about halfway through.